thank you, first of all, to the organizers of this really exciting conference for inviting me to come and do this. It's really exciting for me to come and also to see all of you here. As I'm listening, I'm thinking, oh, they're very good at that. Oh, they're very good at this. Oh, they're very good at that. Which makes me very happy because I am not going to talk about horse tourism in Denmark. You already have had the experts. And I am not going to talk about horses in Denmark because you all know more than I do. What I am going to talk about today is where horses fit within the wider economy and where horse tourism fits within the wider economy. Because it's a very important issue that we have to go out and tell people about how important the horse economy is to rural places in Europe. The politicians are not so used to hearing this from us. So, here we go. I will talk about these things. First, I'm going to talk about how the world of horses has changed. This is why I talk about the 21st century. Then how the economy has changed in our favor. We're going to look at the current state of horses in Europe now, at least in terms of the economy. And then where that growth, where the new activities will come in the horse economy. And I will then make a direct focus on what I have learned about equine tourism. Are you okay if I say equine? Mine studenter på Norge kan ikke forstå equine. After two samlede, equine. Heste. So I just need to be sure, yes? Okay, the changing world of horses. All through human history, what horses have done is determined by what humans do. And so the role horses have taken in human society has changed. These days, the archaeologists argue that it took 2,000 years to learn how to ride horses after they were domesticated. Apparently, humans domesticated mules first, donkeys. You know how you ride a donkey? You get on from behind? Try that with your horse. It took a long time to figure it out. So horses were food for 2,000 years of human history until we learned to ride. That was 6,000, 5,000 years ago. So, and the history of horses is the history of technological innovation. For example, the stirrup. I mean, imagine, well, if you've ever ridden bareback, you know what riding without a stirrup is like. And think of how that empowered people, for example, to fight, which of course we often hear about horses and humans fighting. That if you don't have a stirrup, you can't swing your big heavy thing around. You swing it around and you fall off the horse. Right? The same way, for a long time, the wheel was a big heavy wooden thing, no good for horses. And so when they invented the wheel with the spokes, suddenly we have chariots, Ben-Hur, and horses making that kind of transport. So technology changes, the economy changes, society changes, and so the role of horses in human life changes. I like to say this: where society goes, so go the horses. Yes. Now, recently, horses in Europe in the 20th century and the 21st century has seen so much change. You understand that from the 1950 until 1970, 1975, well, let's go earlier. Just after the Second World War, the population of horses in Europe declined by approximately 90%. We lost a lot of horses. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge number. And if you read, for example, newspaper reports from London or New York in 1914, people are complaining about how many horses there are, and how smelly they are, and how noisy they are, and how these new things called automobiles are going to be clean and quiet. Since the 1960s, horse ownership and ridership has slowly grown from that very low base, about 7 to 8% a year. What we do with those horses has changed, of course. We don't use them for industrial production or farming production. One of the great ironies of history is that when the railways, the steam railways started, there were more horses than ever, because they needed horses to get from the railway track, to the bottom track, to the warehouses and the businesses. So ironically, the time of steam and the Industrial Revolution, there were more horses in Europe than at any other time, including now. What we now see, of course, is we don't need horses for our factories and we don't need horses on our farms. But it turns out this growth, this new activity, you find it in therapy, in tourism, in lifestyle, free youth. And that's the situation we have now. I also will quote the European Horses Network. These figures are not accurate. These are estimates only. I'm a social scientist. When they say, well, they don't put it here, they estimate 100 billion euros a year spent on horses. And I say, you don't mean 97.36 billion? You don't mean 102.49 billion? Where did you get that number? Oh, okay. However, and we need those numbers. And if anybody would like to give me the money to do the research, we'll do it. I have colleagues, we're ready to find out the number of horses, the economic impact in Europe. We need to know that because we need to tell the politicians how valuable and important this is. Yeah. Currently, this is pretty much what they say, though. It is incredibly gendered, of course, as all you... Actually, there are more men in this room than I'm used to in person. Because it is such a gendered field of activity, yes? Increasingly so. So I want to talk about this horse economy. And economists talk about sectors of the economy. Originally, the first human civilizations were agricultural. We harvested things from the land. It's called the production economy. And then, not so long ago, the industrial economy started. And we built things from those things in factories. And then even more recently, the service economy became the dominant way that people made money and were engaged in economic activity in the 1950s and 60s. And now, of course, the knowledge economy and the experience economy in developed nations generate the largest amounts of growth and wealth. Well, that's really good for us, and it's really good for hesteturisme, yes? We live in an economy today in which there are two specific areas of economic activity generating the fastest rates of growth and income and wealth. And that is the knowledge economy and the experience economy. And I'm not exaggerating here, when I say that leisure activities are highly significant generators of wealth, and people are willing to pay more for them. In a world of globalization, of mass consumption, where there's McDonald's in Beijing and McDonald's in Delhi and McDonald's in Moscow, those places and things which you can't get everywhere, which are unique to a place, have the highest value. So, for rural places, what used to be considered backwards, hillbilly, inbred, is now the special thing. And horse tourism is incredibly well positioned, of course, to take advantage of that change in the society. And let's not forget, the World Bank says that tourism is the largest economic activity in the world. Bigger than petroleum? They don't say whether it's bigger than wars. That might be bigger. But this is a very significant thing. And of course, how do we, in a society which is industrial and commercial, how do we think of tourism? Poorly paid jobs, right? We have to change that attitude. We have to change that. It's not about minimum wage jobs for kids. It's about building a new generation of tourism professionals. And outside of this, I have several research projects creating bachelor grad curriculum on creating new experience-based tourism, for example. This kind of thing. What drives this? Okay. It's obvious. Over 50% of Europeans now live in cities. We have more money to spend, more disposable income. We are better educated than we have ever been as a mass. All of these things drive this growth of consumption. Yes. Sits behind it, yes? Now, of course, as society changes, so too does the demands it makes on our horses. We were talking about welfare there a moment ago. This is, of course, a significant issue. I'll come back to this in a minute. But it's even more than that. For example, if you look at native breed horses, many of them are endangered, disappearing. I've had a research project in Faroe. There's a Faroe horse. Did you know there was a Faroe horse? There are 82 of them alive. And that number has increased dramatically in the last 10 years. Eight horses were reported last year. It's a big reason to celebrate.
Can you say the breed of the horse again?
Faroes, from Faroe. Faroes. Yes. They used to export hundreds and hundreds every year to work in the mines in Storbritannia. And then the mines got motors, no more horses, they stopped breeding the horses. I call it, there must be an economic imperative to breed a horse. There must be a market. And if you take that economic imperative away, the horses disappear. So we will see, a change in relative numbers of breeds depending upon how suitable they are for the new society that we're talking about. And of course, as society changes, there are always new opportunities. Some uses are declined until they're a tiny proportion. I don't have time to do this today, but I always talk about what is an Arbeitshest. Arbeitshest is no longer a horse that pulls big heavy things. The estimate is about 3% of horses, 2 to 3% of horses in Europe still are engaged in heavy work. And most of that is hobby. Our horses now have the same job as the young woman in the spin class in our training center. Yes? And we need to acknowledge that. And I am the vice president of the European Association of Animal Sciences Horse Commission, and I am always going on about how we need to change veterinary education to recognize this. If we want to talk about horse welfare. For human beings, when we work in the service sector, we get stressed. Emotional labor. It's the same for horses. You think about a therapy horse. A poor horse, it's like somebody yelling in your ear at the top of their voice in a language you don't understand. Do we help that horse afterwards? These are questions that, these changes bring that we have to deal with. But here's the key part. Horses used to be part of the production of wealth, and the production of farming and forestry. Now they're part of the consumption. We've moved from production to consumption. Or, as we like to say, from workhorse to hobby horse. But it is work. Yes. Here's a good example. In Norway, there was a report that came out in 2013. Over 78% of riders are female. Over 48% of those women have a university or higher education degree, which means they have pretty good jobs, which means they have disposable income, which probably means that they live in a leiligheter in some kind of urban situation. It's very hard to keep your horse in your apartment, yes? So you keep your horse in a stall. You don't want to drive more than half an hour because you want to see your horse every day. So increasingly growing around urban populations in this peri-urban region is this very useful small farm economy for stalling horses. Yeah. In Norway, you can get 5,000 NOK a month for stalling somebody's horse. If you have a small farm that has a marginal economy, if you keep 10 horses, you're suddenly putting 50,000 a month into the farm economy. And if you grow the hay, then you're not paying, you're not bringing in outside costs. It's a very good way to keep small farms in business. And we all know that that's a very difficult challenge because industrial agriculture wants big farms. And I can't do this here, but in my courses, I actually teach a module of how to take the farm assets and convert them for horse business assets. And how, if you had to get all of those assets from scratch, you couldn't afford to do it. But if you have old, small farms with old buildings that are too small for a milk parlor, it's a good stall. It's even more extreme. In Norway, less than 34% of horses are kept on farms. And farms have the largest groups of horses, 10, 12, 15 horses. So actually, even less percentage than that of farms keep horses when you start to look at the numbers. And what we see is what we've already seen, what we've been talking about today. Major activities are divided between leisure riding and amateur competition, education, which is an incredible socio-pedagogic use of horses is a field that is growing immensely, and of course therapy. What we get though is, for example, in Norge, we har had fjordingekrisis, less than 200 fjords born each year. That's a red light. Now, unlike the Iceland test, there is a stud book in Norge, there's a stud book in Canada, there's a stud book in the US, there's a stud book in South America, and they have lots of fjord horse there. But in the home of fjording in Norway, Normen are not breeding and buying fjordheads. What do they buy? Well, they're buying the more popular European breeds. That Iceland test, yes? I mean, Iceland test everywhere. I told you about the Faroese Rus, as they say. When I went to do the research, I'm interviewing these tourism operators, and they're saying, why are you interested in the Faroese horse? This is in Faroe. Why don't you get Iceland tests? They're way better. I'm like, but this is your grandfather's horse. No, this is the horse of your heritage. Nah. You can do everything with these slide tests. So, this changes. And it is about fashion. It is about popularity. I'm not saying, I wouldn't say any horse is better than any other horse. Not if I wanted to walk out of here alive. But, you know, the point is that some we like now and others we used to like before. And horses suffer from our likes and dislikes. Because we're the ones who breed them, we're the ones who buy them. And so, you know, as changes come, there are challenges. Okay. It raises, these changes that I've just talked about, raise some interesting challenges. And the first is that less and less riders are coming from an agricultural background. Didn't grow up on farms, are not used to big animals, are not even used to how to be out in the countryside and farming in those ways. Yeah? So that has a big implication for educating these riders. We have to educate them much more. We cannot assume that, for example, they know how to walk beside a horse and not be kicked or bitten. We have to understand that they maybe don't know that if I ride through this farmer's field, I'm going to ruin his income. All of those things. So there's changes in that as well. But what's also important is that the new people coming to riding, the 7 to 10% a year of new riders, they might not want the same things from a horse that we do, or that the traditional riding community does. And this is a key point, because if you're going to run a business, you have to know what your customers want. And that means you have to ask these questions. It may be that you do know what they want, but if you don't ask the question, you don't know. And so this is really important for us. Again, some of the social changes that are wrapped up with the horse world. Urban life again, social media, the changing importance of fitness. I'm old enough to remember when men like me would scoff at going to the gym. I'm a truck driver. I work for a goddamn living. I don't have to go and exercise. I do now. There's the value of this has changed, and so has the economy, of course. The amount of money we spend on training centers, on spandex, on walking, rambling, bicycles, so many things. And of course, horse riding is part of that. So, this is not to say that the old equine sector has disappeared. In particular, we still have horse racing, professional racing. We still have the other major equestrian sports, jumping and all of those things. And the economy that supports that. Horse breeders. I was in Belfast last year, and I saw a horse that has sold 4 million pounds of semen. Yeah. Poor guy. But, obviously, that is the traditional, the old horse sport. Yeah? It's still very significant. However, large parts of it are declining. Trav, for example, is declining across the northern Scandinavian countries. It is in decline in Norway. It is in decline in Finland. It is in decline in Sweden. No? We have this phenomenon that in Norway, the Trav guys are getting older and older and older, and the young ones are not coming in. So there is this rebalance, if you want, of what is the kind of activities like this. The trouble is, of course, that because of the betting, generates a lot of money. And so they tend to dominate. They dominate the universities, they pay for veterinary science, reading, genetics. The European Horse Network is paid for by betting money. And when I started doing this research 10 years ago, the only people who got research money were veterinary scientists. And I'm a social scientist. That's different time. And it's been an uphill argument to say, actually, if you want to understand horse welfare, you have to understand the belief systems of horse owners and riders, as well as the physical bodies of the horse. That's been a very difficult argument, because why should we give up our money to give some to you? And so these changes also are an issue that we also have to somehow manage as a community of people who care about horses. We also have to walk through, yes? The new sector is really it's about leisure, it's about well-being and health, whether it's sociopedagogic uses, whether it's equine-assisted activities and therapy, which is the latest word they've decided to use, EAAT. These are the kind of professional uses, and then of course there's all of the leisure uses. I've been known at conferences to invite somebody to have a session, and I have somebody, a friend, who's a high school secondary principal in Finland, and she uses horses with young teenage men who are at risk of failing school. You know, young, poorly socialized boys who don't talk. She puts them with horses, and she's actually just finishing a PhD. She's found incredibly successful results using it. So I get Rita to come up and talk about sociopedagogy with troubled teenagers. And then I have somebody else come up and talk about hippotherapy, so recovering from operations. And then I have somebody come up and talk about using horses for mental health. And then I get up and I say, well, it's been a long time since anybody's written down that I'm crazy. And it's been a long time since I've been in hospital. And it's been an even longer time since I've been a juvenile delinquent. But every time I hang out with horses, I get the same benefits as those teenagers, as those patients. We all do. This isn't about being ill. Every one of us gets these kind of benefits from associating with horses. So this is where the growth is, I think, is in this kind of thing. Now, just to give you I'm just going to touch into tourism here. This is based on research. This is one of the books, The New Equine Economy, and of course you will see the hesteturisme, you say, yes, what we call the Good Practice Guide. If you see the Good Practice Guide, you'll see that there's very little about horses in it. There's an awful lot about business and tourism business. Yes? What is horse tourism? It's often bigger than you think. It includes more than you think. There's a lot of horse tourism which doesn't involve riding. For example, in France and Italy and Spain, they have festivals where tens of thousands of people come. Horses feature as the core of that. So it's not just trekking. It's not just the sort of standard thing that one thinks of. There are, of course, others, riding for disabled. Increasingly people are actually offering that as almost like a tourism service. So people come from Manchester up to the north of England and ride, people who are disabled. And of course we travel to purchase horses. If you've ever been to Iceland to go to a breeding center, that's tourism too. So is traveling for a course for education, yes? So it's much bigger than you might think. And what's really important is that you understand that when we think of tourism, we think of international tourism. But in fact, that is the smallest part. Domestic horse riding tourism is much bigger. Iceland, 16% of people entering through Reykjavik airport said they would ride a horse in Iceland. But a study done sometime later showed that international riders are less than 40% of the tourism market in Iceland. 60% are Iceland folk. Domestic tourism is really important, and really I think is the place to begin one's concentration. Because domestic tourists come more often. They may not spend as much the one time, but they come more times, and they come back, and they come back. Yeah. Somebody says there should be about 20 million active recreational horse riders in developed nations. Well, there you go. That's quite a market, isn't it? You know, whether it's 20, 18, 24, it's still a heck of a lot of people. And of course, the international market is strangely concentrated, yes? There are approximately 15 to 20 international operators who book horse tours. And they don't deliver the tour. They deliver the customer to the tour operator, yes? Even though, I want to go riding in Mongolia, so I go to the office in London, and they say, yes, we have somebody in Mongolia, and it'll be 6,000 euros, you pay with your credit card, you don't have to pay anything else. Great. That's the kind of, that's the shiny example, of international horse tourism, yeah? Most specialist international agencies are in Europe or the USA. And they're constantly being driven by the need to create new services, new destinations. Which means that if you're not already on their list, you should start talking to them, if you want. And of course, there is always this issue. People always say they're better writers and they pay less. And all tourism operators have to work with this. So my respondents in Skagafjörður in Iceland, they say we add 10 more kilos to the weight that they tell us. And if they say I'm a level 3 rider, we think level 2. Yeah? Important to keep in mind, of course. Yeah. So lessons from my research. The horse tourism sector has a characteristic that is both an advantage and a disadvantage. And that is that most horse tourism businesses operate like a family business, and they welcome their guests in almost like family members, which provides an incredibly important, quality of experience. Yes? At the same time, they're very afraid of becoming professional, which unfortunately means that professionalism can be a serious challenge. We had a meeting in this horse tourism, native breed horse tourism project in Nordfjords, is the home of the Fjords Center. Yeah. And I had a guy who was the local Ludwigling director for that area. He said, no, you don't understand it. When you ask a tourism professional, what are the 3 most important things for a tourism business? They will say, customer service, marketing, quality control. If you ask a horse tourism business, what are the 3 most things for a horse tourism business? They'll go, horse, yes? Because of course, as horse people, we always have to know more, and we get our respect from our knowledge of horses, So he says, well, what the heck are we going to do? And the solution we had to come up with is collaborate with other professionals, with tourism marketing professionals, with quality control professionals. And it's starting to work now in the Sogndalsfjord area of Norway. They've started to include that into there. And so, if I have one piece of advice for people offering tourism boards, or tourism businesses with horses, is to collaborate with the other tourism businesses in your region. And let them do the hard work about quality control standards, or whatever. So, there are opportunities, There's a growing demand, a growing economy. Lots more women don't ride horses. Who could? And there are challenges. We need to really think about our focus on marketing and customer service. I think from what I've seen here in Denmark, this is less an issue than it is, for example, in the United Kingdom, where you're lucky if there's a roll of toilet paper, never mind hot water, not a chance, you know? But nevertheless, you know, we need to think more about quality customer service. Of course, we have to think about welfare, appropriate price points. Everybody knows how expensive Norway is. You can ride for 5 days in Norway, in the fjella, catered, everything like that, for less than 1,000 NOK a day. That's cheaper than almost anywhere else in the world, because they don't know how valuable it is. Yeah? So we need to think about that, you know? So, a challenge. We need to build a horse tourism sector which is aware of the real reasons that drive its new customers. We need to increase the service quality of our offerings in parallel with the increasing quality in other tourist activities, because people are getting used to that. The horse world has changed, riders have changed with it, and we need to make sure that the services we offer are changing too. And if we do, we can put more horses in work, we can have more economic activity, in the equine sector. We can have more female entrepreneurs. Hey, there's EU money for female entrepreneurship. Yes, like lots of it. It's an important thing, and especially in rural places. Employment for them. Excellent opportunities for small farms that are not applicable for industrial agriculture anymore. And we can offer our customers an experience that brings them back again and again and again. And that's horse tourism in the 21st century. Yeah? We need to bring professional practice into our sector. Maybe we are already, but if we are, then we need to celebrate that and share it more widely. Yeah? We need to join up with other tourism organizations, and with the continuing increase in global mobility and money, the demand for what we have to offer